moms in Massachusetts are raising the volume for an entirely different reason.
Sarah Harmon.
Sarah Harmon. Sarah Harmon. What's up, Sarah?
She's a mental health therapist, yoga teacher, and founder of the School of Mom.
Hey, hi everyone. This is such a treat to be in person. Oh, thank you for having me in your beautiful space. I am honored to welcome you back as a community into this in-person event. Sophia reached out and was like, "Oh, we'd love to have you come talk, and the topic is ethos, and you know, are you interested?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely, that sounds amazing." And then I hung up and I thought, what exactly is ethos? What is that? So I went down my own little research. Like, it's kind of one of those words you, or at least for me, I had an idea about, I had a feeling about, but I wasn't totally clear on it. And I actually loved the definition on the page on Creative Mornings, and specifically one question from Annie Yee. I think she's the one that wrote that little piece. And the question is, what ways of moving through the world did you inherit? What ways of moving through the world did you inherit? I think this reflection question that Annie invites us to ponder is one I'm going to come back to today, because this specific question and answer really has been a huge part of my life and the work that I do now with the School of Mom and helping the communities that I'm a part of. So my story, a little bit of my story. So I grew up in Amesbury, Massachusetts, north of Boston. 3 kids, 2 married parents. Like, we were kind of the family that everyone looked at. It was like, oh, you know, can we come over to your house? Like, your house is so loving and warm and welcome. And from the outside it was great, and honestly from the inside it was great too, until it wasn't. So the irony of this is, about probably 13 years ago, I think it's been, I went back to school to get my master's in clinical mental health counseling, to become a therapist. It was something I knew it was just my calling. I knew ever since my first psychology class in undergrad I was going to be a therapist. I needed to get lost. I had no business counseling anybody post-college. I needed to go and live my life a little bit. So eventually came back. And the weekend that I got my diploma, I walked across the stage at the Bank of America Pavilion and got kind of that you can be a therapist. You have, you know, passed all the requirements. My mother was involuntarily committed for the first time to a mental health hospital up in Maine. And so you can imagine, like, I'm walking across kind of in a daze, grabbing my diploma, being like, what the fuck? Like, what is going on? I'm getting my degree, and yet, like, my mom is in a mental health crisis, and my family is just being, you know, we at that point I knew it was going to be a big shift for us, and I didn't quite understand the magnitude of it. So this mental health crisis, and essentially the breakdown of my family, as I knew it, this foundation for me, really launched me into the deep end of a lot of pain, a lot of exploration around my own healing, my own self-awareness, really understanding mental health on a new level. My father said to me at that point, you know, you got your master's at Lesley here in Cambridge. If anyone knows Lesley, I got my degree there, but you'll get your PhD from your mom. And that rings very true for me right now. So she has really taught me a lot in terms of healing, but really also this, like, you know, my evolution of mental health. And a big piece of this, as I've kind of, between being a therapist as well as the personal experience, one of the things I really started to understand and explore was, what does it mean to be a human being? And this is kind of a funny thing, because, like, we're all humans, so you kind of know what it means to be a human being. But as a therapist and as an adult, I had a lot of shame as a therapist, because I was like, I feel like I'm kind of getting to learn about emotions, like, as a therapist, right? Like, you know, people think therapists are these well-versed, totally, like, you know, get emotions and all these things on a very deep level, and the jig is up. Like, we don't actually, many of us, we don't. We're learning it too, right? So I'm going to share what I teach a module in my program in the School of Mom called Being Human. And the reason why I teach this is because I realized as I worked in college space for a while, and then I work primarily with adults in a clinical capacity now, that I was not the only one that didn't really understand what it means to be human. So I'm going to explain a little bit of what I mean by that, and maybe this is new to you, maybe not. But so what does it mean to be human? So from this kind of mental health perspective, right, we have a body, and the body holds the mind. And we have thoughts, about 50 to 70,000, and even more than that a day, right? We have thoughts. Thoughts are not real. Thoughts come from nature. They come from our genetics. Thoughts come from nurture. They come from conditioning that we've had, whether it be our family, our society, or the culture we live in, right? So the thing about thoughts is, we're all thinking right now, right? You're thinking, because you're human. They are, about 90% of them are subconscious, unconscious. Most of the time we're running on this autopilot, kind of in a little bit of a pre-programmed situation here. So that's interesting, right? And a lot of times we're believing our thoughts, which is an important thing to note, that like thoughts are not always true. Most of them aren't actually. So we have thoughts, and thoughts lead us to have emotions. What's an emotion? So an emotion is this process that happens in your body because of thoughts. And we have thoughts when we have certain things like events outside of us or events inside of us. So like something like the word pandemic. The word pandemic triggers lots of thoughts, right? And when we have thoughts, we have an emotion that comes from that thought. And this is another interesting piece is, like I'm curious, raise your hand if you understand the difference between an emotion and a feeling. We were like, yeah, no, actually, what? Do I? Right? Right, interesting. So they're used interchangeably, but they're not the same thing. So the way that I explain emotions and understand them for myself is that the emotion really is this process that happens in your body, and if you allow the emotion to run its course, it actually has a shelf life of about 90 seconds. So there's some really cool research about that. And what unfortunately happens, because of what I'll get into in a moment, is that when we have the ability to block that natural process of an emotion because of the way that we resist it or think about it. And so we keep it kind of stuck. It's almost like the emotion is a train running through a tunnel, and if we just let it goes through, and we allow for the next one. But we have these thoughts about the emotion, and it's like a pile of rocks that go right in front of it, in front of this emotion train, and it's like, right, we get all of a sudden blocked up. So the feeling is how you sense the emotion. It's the mental awareness that you have around this process that's going on in your body. So when I'm sitting with a client and they're like, oh my God, I'm feeling anxious. Right? I'm like, well, tell me about that feeling. They're like, okay, well, it's up in my chest, or I feel like my throat's closing, right? And then I go to the next client, and they're like, oh my God, I'm feeling anxious. I'm like, well, tell me about your feeling. Well, it's like down here, like I feel like I go to the bathroom, and I'm gonna throw up, and I'm like, okay, right? So everyone here experiences emotions, but you might feel it in a different way, right? So they're connected, but they are different. So we have emotions and feelings, and then when we feel something, it drives us to do something or not do something. So there's a choice we make. A lot of times this choice is not actually conscious, right? Because our thoughts are unconscious, we're kind of going through this it's kind of like a domino effect, but it's not totally linear. So we have the thoughts, we have the emotions and the feelings, and that feeling is driving us to behave, right? To make a choice. So we make a choice, and then there's an outcome to that choice, essentially, right? So we act or we don't act, and then there's a result of that choice. So this process is happening all the time. And really, we're not taught about it in school, right? And it's not modeled for us. And so essentially, back to Andy's question, one of the things that we inherit is a lack of knowledge around what our experience is as a human. And even more than that, we inherit beliefs and judgments about our human experience. So, for example, in my family, this line was said often, there's no place for anger. This was from my dad. my dad, it was not his fault, right? He grew up in a family where there was a lot of mental illness. His mom actually tried to take her own life. She was addicted to painkillers. His dad ended up dying of alcoholism, and there was a lot. And so he had, the way he was molded and shaped and what was not modeled for him was a healthy relationship with anger. It wasn't safe for him to feel it. It wasn't welcomed, right? So that, of course, is what he inherited or was kind of taught to him. And so here come his kids, and there's no place for anger here. So for me, as a kid who's having a feeling, what does that teach me? It teaches me that this is not something, my body is wrong, right? There's no place for anger. Well, wait a second, I'm experiencing it, I'm feeling it, and you're saying there's no place for it, so what do I do? What do I do with this anger, right? So quietly on my own as a therapist, I am going through the process of welcoming my emotions and learning about this process of being human, right? I'm doing this through grad school but beyond in the last decade or so, and starting to teach it and really learning that other people's knowledge is limited, and most people have very strong reactions or judgments about certain emotions, especially what we would call the unpleasant ones, right? So unpleasant, anger, sadness, grief, right? These are not bad, but often we think of them as bad, right? Because, for example, I have a 4 and a 6-year-old, and I've had to rewire myself when they're sad or they're in an unpleasant state. What do I ask them? Hey, what's wrong? What's wrong? Well, it's an interesting question, right? What's wrong is that I am associating this negative emotion, this unpleasant emotion. That's wrong. It's actually not wrong. The better question would be, hey, what are you feeling? Right? What's going on? There's nothing wrong. We don't say when someone's happy, we're not like, what's wrong? Right? We're like, oh, cool. Like, yay, that's good. Like, I want that, right? Because it's pleasant. It's pleasant. But they're all healthy and normal because you're human, right? So quietly, I'm changing my relationship to emotions and working on that for myself. And then we have the pandemic. And I'm going to say it a few times. Sorry. I'm going to say this because I actually want us to shift our relationship to it, right? So we have the pandemic, and it's this perfect storm of more of these unpleasant, intense emotions. It's like the pandemic provided I call it like a pressure cooker of these unpleasant emotions. More grief, more anxiety, more stress, more sadness, more depression, and less coping skills, less access to all the things that help you feel better. So it is truly this perfect storm, right? This perfect pressure cooker, so to speak. And you guys can throw tomatoes at me. Please don't throw the amazing pastries because we want to keep eating those. But I'm not a fan of silver linings. I don't want this to come across as a silver lining. But I think there's a real blessing in the pandemic in that it pushed people to the ultimate extreme of discomfort with their emotions. That they could not ignore them anymore. They could not just go hang out with friends when they were feeling sad, angry, overwhelmed, depressed, and feel a little bit better and keep going, but never really resolve it, right? They all of a sudden were just smack in the face with these intense emotions that they'd probably been feeling a little bit, but they'd been able to mitigate, ignore, manage, and no longer, right? The pandemic just cracked it all open. And from my side as a therapist, I will tell you, it was really fascinating to see, just a little anecdote. So I continued to see therapy clients throughout the pandemic, and I had this huge wave of people that I had seen that we had terminated that said, I need to come back, right? And I primarily work with women, but a few men. And then I got a wave of couples. Did you see couples? Do you see couples? My partner and I can't even live in this house with this person, right? And then about a year and a half after, March 2020, it was, do you want to see my partner? My husband's falling apart. My partner's falling apart. And it was just interesting to see this trajectory. And one of the thoughts that's just connected to the judgments that we have is, I think people, holding on to the narrative around certain things, like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't be struggling. I don't need help. And really what happened was this pandemic said, no, actually, I can't manage this anymore. So I need help. So people reached out, right? And so during the pandemic, I'm seeing clients virtually, and I'm in it, right? As a therapist, I have a few mentors who have said to me, in their lifetime as therapists, some people have been in the field for a long time, the only other world event where they were in the same exact experience as their clients was 9/11. And 9/11 was tragic and awful, but it did not go on for as long as the pandemic. So here I am as a therapist trying to process all this stuff with my clients while going through it at the same time. It was just a very hard time. I don't know if there's any therapists in the room, or knows therapists. It was hard. It was hard for everyone, but definitely a challenge. And so I'm talking to these clients, and I'm seeing in their bodies this growing level of discomfort and the grief processes and anger and rage, and it's building. And nothing to do, nowhere to go with it, right? So I would say casually to them, kind of, casually, not casually, like, okay, well, maybe we just need to get in the field and scream. Like, that's what we can do right now. And so in 2021, I was like, all right, let's do this. Like, I've been talking about it. You all keep asking me to do it. I've been teaching yoga for a long time. I love creating space, and if we do it outside, it feels safe, right? 2021 was still, people were in masks. It was still a little bit of that resistance of like, is this okay? Like, should we be out here outside screaming? But we knew we needed it. So 2021, we go out. I think if I hit this, yeah. So this is 2021. Speaking of amazing, talented creatives, Alice Rouse, who I really encourage you to check out. She did really as a healing body of work for her. She's a mom. She's a brilliant photographer. She came out and joined us, and then did this whole series around women and moms during this time, and some really cool shots of us screaming at our homes. But this was the 50-yard line. Here we are. It was the freezing cold January night in Boston. People kind of came out of the shadows. And we screamed and we yelled and we cried, and it was so healing and so cathartic. And then we said we need to do this every day, and we didn't. And as you guys can remember, maybe, unless you blacked it out, got a little better. Like, the summer was better, and then came Omicron. Fast forward to January 2022. And I, ironically, in January of last year, had a silent retreat I was supposed to be on, the week of the scream that went viral. I was supposed to be sitting in silence for 8 days. I'd been looking forward to it, not only professionally but personally, and it was canceled. Shocker. I went into my own fit of resistance and rage, right? And really that scream was like, I am gonna bust. I'm going out there. Who wants to join me? And I had this whole group was like, please, we've been waiting, like, let's go. And long story short is that scream went viral. We had, I made it onto the cover of the Boston Globe with my kids' unicorn wands. And before you know it, I was on the Today Show, and that led to just this crazy domino effect of media. And I am like a social media nursery school student, I say. I have no idea what I'm doing. So it was kind of funny to watch the way this all unfolded. And I realized, though, why it went viral, right? Things go viral because they strike a chord. And it wasn't just the moms in the community I was in. People were seeing in me, in these images, in the story of the scream, they were seeing, they were feeling the connection to the emotion they were having too. And not just the connection, they were getting permission to feel it. Wait, anger could be like welcomed here, right? Like, it's okay for us to release it. And so the truth is that for this one, with my dad, like, it's like, actually, Dad, there is a place for anger. There's a place on the cover of the Globe. There's a place on the Today Show. And the reasoning, and this went global. I got the most amazing emails and outreach from people all over the world that led screams in their communities. Again, not just moms. And it was remarkable. And it really just broke open the conversation around anger, which I think is such a gift from this scream. And also talked about, something I teach in the School of Mom. Essentially, like, the scream is kind of one of the tools that I teach, and the tools being, how do we meet ourselves in the moment with curiosity, with a sense of presence, and then intuitively take care of ourselves. And that was what the scream was. It was recognizing intense anger, our bodies needing to like let go of something and then allowing them to do it, right? So that is essentially what we do. So I just want to take a pause back to Annie's question and allow you guys to reflect for yourself on this question of what was inherited for me, right? What ways of moving through the world did you inherit? And one of the ways I think about this in my community is I talk about the generational baton. So the generational baton is essentially connected to Annie's question. It's what was modeled for you? What are you learning in terms of emotions, anger, right? Unpleasant emotions, things like all just this being human. But what was your generational baton on anger? Anyone willing to share? Like anyone like, oh my gosh, well actually anger in my house was so prevalent that like I was so scared. So if I think about anger, this is what comes up for me. It feels like it's a given part of a relationship, right? For me, there was no conflict between my parents ever. Like they never fought. I remember one time they had a disagreement about directions. My husband and I had a disagreement about directions this morning in the car, and we'll have 9 others like at the rest of the day, right? But for me, that what was modeled for me was no conflict, right? And that was not necessarily a healthy thing. So I'm curious, anyone willing to share? Yeah.
So children weren't allowed to feel anger.
Yes.
So like the adults would fight or argue, like there was no holiday you could get through without somebody getting angry at somebody, but the kids were never allowed to feel anger.
So interesting. So kids, no anger. Adults, yeah, you can feel whatever you feel. Right.
But they dealt with it in rage, like they just
Right. And it was very open and probably there was no conversation about it. It just happened.
Yes.
There was no like education with the children about what was going on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very scary for those kids, right? Wait, so you're telling me I can't feel it, but yet like when you're fighting in front of us, I'm having this, what am I supposed to do with that? Right. Anyone else willing to share? Yeah.
Mine's more about like crying, but like sporadic crying. It was like, really, you're gonna cry right now? And it's like, sometimes you just need to cry, and there doesn't have to be a reason.
Right.
You don't have to overanalyze, you can just cry. And it's like, it's totally fine, but
Totally.
I remember my mom saying that, like, you're crying right now.
Yeah,
It's
you're
like,
crying right now.
I didn't choose it.
And you're like,
And
yes, I am.
I'm gonna hold
you
it
know?
in the more it comes out. And I remember
Yes.
at school, like, this girl came up to me, like, you're not supposed to be doing that right now.
Yeah.
Like in class, and I was like, well, I don't know what to do, and then I just got more upset. It was like, yeah,
And think about back to the emotion being a train.
yes,
You're basically saying to a kid, like, you need to stop that train. And you're like, but the train is going at like 65 miles an hour. What do you mean stop the train? Right? It's such a good one. You know, so I worked in the college space for a while at Wentworth Institute of Technology. And they would start to cry, right? I had like 7 tissue boxes trying to normalize crying. But they'd be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. And so they would start to roll their eyes at me because I would do this often. I did my You're Human cheer. So I go, oh, you're human! You're human! And I'd get really, geeky about it. And they'd be like, what? What do you mean? Like, she celebrated my crying? Right? Like, it was like, you could see the circuitry in their brain being like, this subconscious, like, no.
people apologize for it all the time. I noticed
Yeah,
if people
sorry.
give an interview on TV, and they're talking about literally like their loved one dying, they're always like, oh, I'm sorry. And I'm like, why are
Yes.
you apologizing? Like, you're allowed to be sad.
Right.
Or like,
Right.
sorry, I can't compose myself. Like, you're not supposed to.
Yeah.
That's okay. But it's such a human trait to be like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm like burdening you. And it's like,
I apologize for feeling this negative
Yeah.
emotion
yeah.
that makes you uncomfortable. It's making me uncomfortable too, right? Thank you for sharing. So I encourage you guys to keep asking yourself that question. So let's practice a new way of being, right? Let's welcome this post-pandemic ethos that we had no choice to really be pushed into, essentially. And so in the School of Mom, I teach, it's rooted in the foundational practices and the wisdom and the science-backed practices of mindfulness and self-compassion. So in order to really kind of grasp mindfulness, I know there's a lot of mindfulness is used, there's the term McMindfulness now. We talk about mindfulness a lot. But I'm going to come back to something I read and I revisit a lot for myself and for my clients. And it's a poem called The Guest House. I don't know if anyone's heard this, but I'm going to read it to you. I think it really is a wonderful way to present mindfulness as I see it. So, the guest house. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He or she may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So I love that poem so much, and really what it speaks to for me is the practice of mindfulness. And I'll give you my definition. So my definition of mindfulness is present moment awareness with all events and experiences. So those could be external, right? So the space that we're in, the colors, the sounds, me talking, that's external for you. And internal events and experiences, i.e. the human experiences of thoughts, emotions, and feelings, right? That's internal. Sensations in your body, back pain, internal experience. Thought of, I have so much to do, internal experience, right? So present moment awareness with all events and experiences, with curiosity, with non-judging discernment, so really identifying like this is not bad or good, is this helpful, is it unpleasant, right? So thinking about the descriptive words we're using there. Acceptance, and that doesn't mean that we're like, oh, I have this back pain, so I'm just gonna accept it, and like that's part of my life now. No, you go get the help, you go seek out the physio or the chiropractor, whatever it is to shift that, but in the moment, you're experiencing back pain. So it's accepting that right now in this moment, I'm experiencing back pain. So that's acceptance, and then kindness. Really that softening the edges, being kind to yourself with whatever's coming up, okay? So I want to do another quick exercise just to really make you guys uncomfortable, maybe comfortable, hopefully. And what I'd like for you to do, it looks like there's some good pairs here. What I want you to do is take a moment, and actually let's just, if you're comfortable closing your eyes, you can do that, otherwise just bring your gaze down. And I want you to shift your attention from me, from this external environment that you're in, to your internal space. So into your mind, into your body. You can notice your chair under your seat or your back. Notice the feet on the floor. Maybe uncross your legs, sit up a little taller. So transitioning your attention inward. Acknowledging you have a body that is breathing. And observe with this open curiosity, what are you experiencing? What do you notice? Is it an emotion or a feeling that comes to mind, comes to your attention? Is it a certain thought or cluster of thoughts that is just percolating big time for you right now? Observing and grounding yourself in this experience and really remembering Rumi's invitation to welcome it all. Open arms, this is it, come on in sensations, come on in feelings. And take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. And open your eyes. Okay, so what you're going to do is turn to the person next to you if you can. And one person's going to start, and you're just going to say either one word or a short phrase of like, I noticed, or I'm feeling calm, or I noticed some anxiety, or I'm feeling anxious, or I'm thinking about X. Just a little short phrase. And the person that you are speaking to, your job is not to fix. It is not to give advice. It is not to tell your story about how you relate, right? right? If you're like, I'm still thinking about that guy that cut me off in traffic this morning, I'm feeling a little unease. The person is like, oh, I got cut off in traffic too, right? Or like, oh my God, well, which way did you go? You should go this way because the road, what we tend to do, we tend to jump in. So the person receiving is doing just that. You're working on being present with what the other person is experiencing, just with your presence. That's it. And I do invite you to say something along the lines of, thank you for sharing that with me. And if something that they shared is hard, like I'm feeling really angry or I'm feeling really sad right now, you could also say, you're not alone. So 2 phrases, thank you for sharing that with me. And if you feel it's appropriate, you're not alone. And then the other person takes a deep breath and you switch and you share, I'm feeling X. And then the other person can be with you in a moment with their presence, okay? So really quick, so just turn to a person, identify who's going first. That person takes a deep breath and just narrates. What came up for you in that check-in? And the other person receives it. Amazing.
Yeah, so I was closing my eyes, just in my body, trying to think about the train. I'm thinking about something else, maybe thinking about taking your question. So it was trying to get in.
So I think right now at the moment I'm feeling excited. Talking, but also really peaceful.
You're not alone in that either. Yeah. I feel comfortable saying that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it.
Without even needing to put the words forward.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. No comments. Eric. Okay. So great to meet you.
Anger is sweeping up. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, like when I'm in the zone, like really focused. Startled.
Yes. Just catching guard.
Yeah.
Totally get it.
Yeah. We really have moved. It's so good. Yeah. 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 I feel like being in touch with our feelings, but I love the differentiation.
Like even though I read a lot, and everyone is clear, but it's not clear. Like there's no one right. Like that's how I enjoy it, and I feel like kids makes for. They're like, oh yes, I can differentiate that. Like no, feeling is like what is sensation, and then I get to decide what that emotion is, and I get to going
It's cool when it gets surprised, like a wood.
Yes, exactly. Sometimes cool. Sometimes not. When it sneaks up on you.
Okay, thank you all so much. Thank you, Eric, for letting me do that too. So I'd love to ask you guys, any reflections on that? How was it? How was it to be the person speaking and sharing vulnerably where you're at, what's going on? Because here's the thing about feelings. We're really good at hiding them as we get older, right? I'm fine. I'm fine. Fine. And how was it to listen and receive? Did you notice this, like, oh, I really want to respond? Yeah. Can you reflect?
Well, like you said, it's hard not to give advice or like share the same experience. Oh, I had that too. Yeah.
Well, and this is your partner?
Yes.
What was it like for you to just speak without getting the advice? How was it for you?
Yeah, so we are feeling similar things, but yeah, it's comfortable to share that. Also,
Control.
yeah, but it's hard to make a work like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks. Anyone else want to share what happened in your partnership? How it was for you? Yeah. Oh, hi.
Yeah, I would say it was really hard to limit my emotions to just one or two words without elaborating.
Yeah.
And I must say too, my feelings originally were frustration, torn, sitting in a self-reflection. But after hearing my partner speak and getting it out and feeling heard, I'm all smile. Like I mean, yes.
The train went through.
Yeah, I'm frustrated, but I feel a lot better.
Yeah. That's awesome. How about for you, Cynthia?
Well, we invited Stephen in too because he was sitting by himself, and I feel like it's true. Like when Stephen was telling us about his stress with work, I wanted to chime in and be like, you just want to like cheer people on, and that's kind of like my MO. Like I'm an art teacher for kids. I'm constantly like pushing them forward, encouraging them, and just stepping away from that was hard.
Yeah.
It was hard.
Yeah, totally. Any reflections?
I think the thing that I noticed in speaking about it was that, like, I'm not sure if this is like, so as I was speaking about it, I noticed the impulse to want to like compliment sandwich it, like make sure there's a positive thing in there.
Such a good reflection.
And
Yeah. Compliment sandwich.
Yeah.
If people didn't hear that.
And I don't
That's
know
awesome.
if that was due to like, oh no, like I'm actually feeling this good thing as well. Like feeling like talking about the feelings led me to finding something that I'm also content with. Or if it was just like the human impulse to be like, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And convey that to my partners.
So good. I mean, you guys brought up a few things. Like Michelle was saying, you were looking to explain. Sometimes it's defend, right? And we can do this with good feelings too. Of like, I'm feeling really happy, and then you're like, oh, I kind of feel guilty. I feel happy because they don't look like they're feeling happy. So, but that's just because like I got a really good parking spot. Like this is warranted. Or I'm feeling really angry because X. Like we have to defend how we're feeling, right? Especially if we have a deeply programmed relationship to that feeling that is not a healthy one, right? So I love that point around the compliment sandwich too, like around like sometimes we kind of have to buffer things too, right? So what you all just did was a wonderful mindfulness practice, and not only how are you present with other people in their stuff, their human experience, thoughts, emotions, and feelings, but what's happening for you, right, when you are expressing and landing yourself where you're at, right? So I have a company called the School of Mom. As Sophia says, MOM stands for Mothering Oneself Mindfully. And really, the School of Mom is an intersection of my professional experience working with adults and college students, and then having kids too, all the experience, and understanding that we really have this limited knowledge around being human. And then, of course, my personal experience with my own mother, who, over a decade later now, I really don't have much relationship with her. And that's been a long road with a lot of deep work on my half. And so what I learned, just to not ramble on the School of Mom too long though, is mothering oneself mindfully. I've learned really deeply from my mom and her mental illness and her being unavailable, that really it was up to me to take care of myself and mother myself. I think we all as humans come onto this planet with this need, this innate need to be seen, to be unconditionally loved, right? If you think about like, how good does it feel when someone's just like, oh, it's okay, come here, come on, yeah, just let it out, right? When you're crying, not right now, it's like, no, right now, come on, and you're like, right? You just like let go, right? So we all crave that, and you can call it like mothering energy, nurturing energy. It doesn't need to be mother, but really we all crave that. We have that need for affirmation of how we are as a human, what we're feeling, and that need to be loved. And when my mom was unavailable for it because of her illness and because of her programming, I realized the next best person was me, right? There's only a bucket my mother could fill. I have an amazing mother-in-law. She couldn't quite fill that bucket of love and affirmation. And I have amazing friends, and I have an amazing partner, but they couldn't quite fill it. And it was like, oh, actually, I can. And it's actually really cool because whether you have a mother who's very healthy and can give you that, can give you the love and affirmation you so deserve and need, sometimes she's not always available, and unfortunately, the way that humans work, we die. She's not always going to be around, right? And it might not be her, it might be another caregiving figure. So with the School of Mom, really what I am helping my community do is to learn how to take care of themselves, to meet themselves in the present moment with curiosity, with kindness, and with compassion, and to shift the relationship they have with themselves around just the human experience, essentially. And so I think about, this is the way that the moving through the world that I want my kids to inherit, right? I want my kids to know it's okay to cry. I want my kids to know it's okay to be angry. I mean, we have a lot of conversations around anger. When I was on the Today Show, it was really cool. My kindergartner's teacher played it for the whole class, and they screamed as a class. And I was like, this is it. Like, this is why we're doing this, right? It was amazing. And so that's my ethos, right? And that's this post-pandemic ethos, is that we can't go back to like not helping each other and being with each other in these big feelings anymore, because they went to the extreme. And we broke, in a way, all of us on some level, right? So my invitation to you is to come back to Rumi's poem and really welcome all of it with yourselves. And know that you welcoming all of it with yourselves with open arms is 100% correlated with how you are able to welcome all of it with open arms with someone you love or someone you don't even know, right? So the few takeaways I want for you today are just what I mentioned around staying curious around this question that Annie has so eloquently put out for all of you and us. So what ways of moving through the world did I inherit? What generational baton was I given, or am I being given, that I'm looking at all of a sudden with a new lens going, wait a second, I don't think I want this baton. I don't think this is helping me. I think I'm gonna put that baton down, and I'm gonna go create my new baton. And I'm gonna change the course of the history and the lineage of our family and what's happening in my community. Gracefully saying no thanks, right? So that's the first one, is really reflecting on this generational baton and being discerning around what you want to move forward for generations to come. And then the second piece is welcoming all of you, right? That is the Rumi poem. It is, okay, narrating it. This is what I'm feeling. I am feeling angry. This is hard. And be with people, find people, you have community here where you can practice this, because it does take practice. We're going against some of this really intense wiring, right? And then the last piece is permission to scream, right? Like whenever you're feeling angry, and you know some of the things that make you feel angry, but really explore anger in your body. Like, how do I know I'm angry? Because we do a whole other talk on anger. It's a really powerful emotion, has a lot of information for us, and it really points to a desire and a need underneath it. So get to know your anger and release it.